So quick intro into who we are. We have a pretty straightforward mission and vision. It is all about civic engagement in Detroit. We want Detroiters to be able to participate in the civic life and shape our city. And we think that all Detroiters can be good citizens. At Citizen Detroit, we really go with the classical definition of citizenship: active residents who participate in the community. We are, it's not about legal status. It's about making sure that you're represented, that you're connected with your government, and that you're able to participate in any way that you possibly can. And so that's what we do. Our CEO is Sheila Cockrell, and we always like to acknowledge our co-founder, Dr. Irvine Reed. Citizen Detroit started in 2012 as a program with Wayne State University, and we've only been independent for a couple of years, since 2017. So we like to give that special shout out to our co-founder whenever we can. So for today, I was here to welcome you. You'll hear from me a little bit later again, and I'm going to hand it over to Vasily, who's on our team, who's going to take us through kind of the opening session or the opening content to get us all on the same page about what's going on with the Independent Redistricting Commission in Michigan.
Yeah, hello everybody. Thank you for joining us. I hope you guys are doing well during this pandemic, and it's good to see everyone engaged with our democracy and making sure that's being taken care of. We have a great program here with two former Redistricting Commission members of California, Cynthia and Andre Parvenu, who are going to answer some of our questions tonight, which is great. That'll be part 2 of our program here on the agenda. The first part, I'll be going over some of the basics to redistricting and our state constitutional amendment, who can apply, becoming a commissioner, what their job duties like, and then go over some approaches to redistricting. Again, my name is Vasily Jacobs. I'm a senior policy analyst here at Citizen Detroit. We'll go over that presentation pretty quickly, hopefully about 20 minutes. Then we'll get to the Q&A with the California commissioners, and then you'll be able to ask your questions for the commissioners so you can get a sense of what this Independent Redistricting Commission here in Michigan is going to look like. First, why are we covering this? Well, we're talking about it in an EngageD capacity because we want you active out there in our democracy and in civic life, and we want to connect to Detroiters with civic action opportunities under our EngageD umbrella. The Redistricting Commission is going to help us determine, our elected representation for our state, and the commission should really be a representative of the diversity of our state and mirror our state population. So we want to make sure that that's going to happen tonight. Now, the Michigan Constitution, Article 4, Section 6, this is a commission of citizens to draw district boundaries for 3 different bodies: for the Michigan Senate, the Michigan House of Representatives, and Michigan's Congress people, the U.S. Congress. It's going to happen every 10 years after the census. So next year, after this year's census, please fill out your census form, because there is some fear that we'll lose a U.S. Congressperson's district and go from 14 districts to 13 districts here in Michigan. But this commission is going to be 13 members, 5 independents, 4 Republicans, and 4 Democrats will sit on the commission to draw these lines. How did this Constitution Amendment come about? Well, in 2018, we voted on a ballot initiative that was called Proposal 2, and it was advocated for by voters, not politicians, a group that petitioned and got that ballot initiative on the ballot, and it passed. So it was an effort to fix the problem of gerrymandering. And gerrymandering is when you draw districts to favor one party or the other, to favor Republicans or to favor Democrats. And both parties have done that, and the voters decided to pass that. Now we got an Independent Redistricting Commission, which you should apply for. We really want you to do that. Why? Detroit right now is currently underrepresented. With the Secretary of State that is overseeing and running the process just recently put out on May 12th that there's about 5,500 processed applications, and Wayne County is only 59th out of the 83 counties in representation in those applications in the applicant pool for this commission. So out of registered voters, we're lagging in Wayne County, and you can only imagine that Detroit is lagging. So please apply now. You see at the bottom of the screen, redistrictingmichigan.org is the website to do that. and it'll be on the screen continuously on a lot of the slides that we're going to go through. Also, only 10% of the applications are African American. The state's population is 14% of African American citizens. 68% of the applicants are over 55 years old. So we do need some younger representatives as well, but whoever you are, apply at redistrictingmichigan.org. The state will have and use statistical weighting to try to fix some of the issues that may arise with a body that doesn't reflect the state's geography and the state's demographics, but we don't want to leave anything to chance. We want you to apply. So June 1st is the deadline. That's the other emphasis. It's coming up. We only got about a couple weeks. Get to redistrictingmichigan.org and apply for this commission. So it's a great historic commission. It's transparent, which is wonderful. A lot of civic engagement is going to be happening on this commission. And it's paid and resourced. You're going to have assets that you can use to become an expert. Don't worry about if you're not an expert. You will become one after sitting on this commission. We're going to talk to a couple experts because I sat on the commission in California. So don't worry about that. It is a job, and you will learn those skills on map making and district making. And you get to keep your current job. That's a biggie. Just like jury duty, you cannot be adversely affected at your current job if you do get picked for this independent redistricting commission. So let's go through the application process, just an overview of how the Secretary of State is doing this and running through the application. So June 1st is the deadline, as we said. There'll be it's a largely random process, randomly choosing 200 applications. Legislative leaders in Lansing are going to strike 20 people, and then there's going to be a random process to pick the final 13. As we said, 5 independents, 4 Republicans, 4 Democrats. The body will meet likely in October this year, and they're going to have to pick districts for both the Michigan Senate, Michigan House of Representatives, and the U.S. Congress in Michigan by November of next year. So who can apply? Well, if you're unregistered in Michigan, you can't. If in the last 6 years you have been a partisan official or a candidate for a partisan office, meaning office, with a political party, you've been a lobbyist, if you've worked for a political party, if you've worked for a political action committee, if you've, if you are an employee of the state, there are some exemptions, so look into that if that's your case. And if you're an immediate family member of the above, you cannot apply for this independent commission. Keep in mind the future. If you do get picked and selected, you cannot run for partisan office for 5 years. So this isn't a stepping stone to a larger role, and that's what that element is put into place to do. So the application process, redistrictingmichigan.org, you can do everything online. I actually went and did it myself, total of 20 to 30 minutes. The state of Michigan offers free notaries. You can do everything online through a Zoom chat, just like that we're on right now, where you meet with someone at a notary at the state. They share their screen with you. You type in your name for the electronic signature, and then you email that in. So you can do everything online, 20 to 30 minutes. Do it at redistrictingmichigan.org. So let's get into the role a little bit of being a commissioner. So it's full-time and part-time work. Some weeks will be really busy, some won't. The benefits are defined by the commission. So the commission is going to set that up. They're going to set up where the level of statewide travel. We don't know where we're going to be at with this virus, with physical distancing. But if in likelihood, you'll be driving up to the UP. So if you haven't been to the Upper Peninsula, you're going to be going. And it's beautiful land, beautiful country, but we do have a big state. I put on there the courts because the courts, there's a slight chance the courts could delay the approval of the maps that the district, of the maps that the commission draws. So the 1+ year commitment could extend a little longer. So a lot of public hearings, of receiving input, of giving feedback on maps that are drawn is going to make up a lot of being a redistricting commissioner. The body can formulate its own process, as I mentioned, but not on voting on the plans. There is a strict process on how the commission votes on the final plans. I'm not going to get into those details, but you check it out if you want to. Each commissioner can only submit one plan. So we're going to talk a little bit about the approaches to redistricting. There's a lot of things that you can take into account when you're drawing a district. You can take into account that it's contiguous, and it has to be. I should clarify, it has to be contiguous. The populations have to relatively be balanced amongst the districts. And, you know, there are plenty of other guidelines set forth. It has to reflect communities of interest. It has to consider county and city lines. It has to be reasonably compact. And it should not violate the Voting Rights Act. And that is, the Voting Rights Act is there to protect minorities and their representation in Congress, the Michigan Senate, in Congress, it's a national bill, to protect their representation. So you cannot divide up minority voters to a level that will run afoul of the Voting Rights Act. And it's not supposed to benefit one party or one individual, like an incumbent, and where that incumbent lives within the district. So here's a map of our current 14 districts. I mentioned we're possibly going to lose a congressional district. We'll see, depending on the census that we're all filling out right now. These maps come to you from 538.com. It's a great project to have, the gerrymandering project. It's a little older now, but it's a great resource if you want to get in the nitty gritty. We're going to go into an overview of just some of these elements of these maps. So if you're not an expert, again, don't get worried or wary of signing up. You will be an expert by the time you're done with this job sitting on the commission. So these are our current congressional districts. You see the color in red will represent a district that's usually Republican. In blue will be a district usually Democrat, and the purple there is in the middle. It's a highly competitive district. So this is what we currently have here in Michigan. Now, this is a map that is proportionally partisan. So this is a map and model you could use to inform your drawing of districts if you were sitting on the Redistricting Commission. It reflects our last two presidential votes here in Michigan. As you know, President Donald Trump won the state of Michigan by roughly 30,000 votes last time around. So we are pretty evenly divided, at least in terms of that election, and pretty regularly a purple state here in Michigan. And so this map says, hey, why don't we just divide up the seats by Michigan's votes in the last two presidential elections? So it gives Democrats 6 solidly Democratic districts, Republicans 7 solidly Republican districts, and 1 competitive district that both parties could possibly win. Although I'll be honest with you, that one does lean Democrat. So in the end, you may get 7 and 7. These are districts that aren't going to switch parties. They're going to stay in each of the parties. So if you want a party that's competitive, a district that's competitive and it's a toss-up and it could jump back and forth between candidates, this is not the map for you. But if you want dependable Democrat or dependable Republican district, this is the map for you. So competitive districts, the opposite here. This says, let's make districts be winnable for both parties. Let's make districts have the shot of going both ways. You know, right now in Michigan, for the U.S. congressional districts, the real race is at the primary level. The real race is an inter-party race, and whoever wins at the primary level for most of our districts in Michigan is going to win the general election. There's not a lot of Democrat-Republican competition for most of our seats in Michigan, not all of them. So this is going to have a lot of competitive districts, 9 in the middle, 2 for Democrats, 3 on the right-hand side. It'll likely create elected officials that are moderate in their outlook. They're not rabidly partisan. They're not rabid Democrats or rabid Republicans. They're likely going to stay in the middle there to appeal to everyone because the district is a toss-up. So this is a compact district and district map, and these are districts where the distance between constituents of that district is as small as possible. This is it's an interesting looking map. I mean, it looks like a bear claw in my eyes. I don't know what you're seeing out there. Obviously, the edges to these borders of the districts are jagged, but it keeps constituents and residents of those districts as united and close to each other as possible. And it's also pretty competitive. You see at the bottom, there's 5 competitive districts here. It was created by a computer, by an algorithm, by an expert, and the commission's going to hear from a lot of experts. But this shows you some of the power of map making that we have at our fingertips today. And it's definitely reasonably compact. Now, keep in mind, one thing I want to note about this map is that one of those districts is 75% African American in Detroit, and the other one near there is 45% African American. So if you're concerned about the level of minority representation, if you think that a district needs 51% African American or 60% African American to get a representative that reflects and will adhere to minority concerns, then this might not be the map for you, because one of them is only 45% African American. Now, that many people think that that isn't as much of an issue nowadays as it was in the past, but that's up to you to decide. County lines. So this is respecting county and city lines, one of the requirements, as I said before, for the commission. It's compact, but it also follows county and city lines. And you see there, some are competitive, pretty good amount are still competitive. Majority minority district, this emphasizes the minority populations being reflected in at least 2 districts, and that is 2, to have a congressperson that reflects their interests when elected. So this is a brief overview and some maps to consider when creating districts. And just a little taste, go to 538.com, the gerrymander project, if you want to get a little deeper into it. Again, apply for the commission. This is all new to you. It's okay. You will learn it. You'll have the budget to learn it on the commission. You'll have the experts there helping you, and it'll be your job to do so. So do apply for the commission when you can. So I'm going to hand it off here, and we're going to get into the Q&A section with California Redistricting former commissioners to help enlighten us of what we can expect here in Michigan, this historic Redistricting Commission.
Yes.
Hi.
Hey there.
And welcome. So just wanted to thank you both very much for being here again and helping us out. To everyone who's on the line with us, California's Redistricting Commission has some differences from ours. However, the individuals who worked on Prop 2 in Michigan, they drew inspiration from the work in California. So there are actually a lot of similarities between the work as well. And so part of the reason that we wanted to have Cynthia and Andre here, who are both still serving on the commission, is so that they can share their firsthand experiences with the work. We understand that this role can seem kind of nebulous and maybe intimidating, and so we wanted you to have the opportunity to hear a little bit about what kind of everyday life can look like, as everyday as it is, and what kind of resources you have access to, those kinds of things. And then finally, Bilal Hamoud is here from the Secretary of State's office. So if there are Michigan specific questions that we don't have the answers to, we want to make sure that you get the most accurate information straight from the Secretary of State. So he's available as well and can answer questions in the chat. He introduced himself in the chat already. And then if we need to, we'll take him off mute and let you see and hear from him as well. So I hope that sounds good. Sounds good to you guys, Cynthia and Andre?
Yep.
Perfect. Oh, sorry, I got a reminder. Also, if you are calling in from the phone, you dial *9 to raise your hand. So, it's a figurative raise your hand, but we'll be able to see it. We'll be able to take you off mute and allow you to ask your question. Great, all right. So I thought it'd be nice to start with just allowing you both to introduce yourselves briefly and maybe share what made you want to apply for California's Redistricting Commission. Whomever wants to start.
Ladies first, Cynthia.
Thanks, Andre. So I'm Cynthia Dye. I'm one of the 5 Democrats on the California Commission. We have 14 members. I am a native Californian, second generation Asian American. I'm a bit of a Silicon Valley stereotype. You can probably see, anyone on the computer can see I'm phoning in from San Francisco. I'm engineer by training and run a business strategy consulting firm, and also an occasional university lecturer on entrepreneurship. And I had no political experience beyond being an engaged citizen. I, voted in every election. I've been involved in get out the vote efforts and voter registration efforts and some particular propositions. But I've been politically engaged since I was, in high school. I was an active member of student government. And when this opportunity came along in California, I thought, what the heck? Why not me? And I hope all of you think the same question. It was an opportunity to kind of get involved in something political without actually having to run for office. And I was really motivated to fix gerrymandering, which was very bad in the state of California before we took over. So that's why I applied.
Okay, and I'm Andre Parvenu. I'm one of the 2 African Americans on our commission. I'm in the Los Angeles area. My background is in geography and urban planning. I'm a former graduate student at Michigan State University. And for all of you Ann Arbor folks, I also took a few elective courses at Ann Arbor, University of Michigan in Ann Arbor as well. So I'm familiar with Michigan, and I have a good idea of what you guys are up against. So I'm really excited about what you're doing and the fact that the deadline is approaching and you're having this effort to get more people involved in this process. I'm literally a child of the 60s. I grew up in the 60s. I grew up on the shoulder of people deeply involved in the civil rights movement, the voter education movement, and voting rights movement, actually. And being one of the first African Americans to integrate the school system in Virginia. So I was born right in the midst of the civic engagement process. So I realize I stand on the shoulders, some pretty big shoulders of those who walked before me. And one of my personal philosophies and values and what caused me to throw in my application was I believe that civic engagement is the cost and price of freedom, that we have to be civically engaged. And it's more important to be, for me, life's not a spectator sport. It's a sport where you have to be involved in the ball game, off the sidelines and on the field. So when I saw this opportunity, I just dove right in there and threw my application in. I didn't think I stood much of a chance, but lo and behold, as it occurred, I'm here today, and it's been one of the most exciting, exhilarating processes and experiences I've had. So I'm glad to share my thoughts with you all this afternoon. And those who are participating or applicants, hold on, you're in for one incredible experience if selected. It's great.
Thanks so much. So could you share what it was like getting started on the commission? And when I say getting started, I mean, you are suddenly with this group of people who are supposed to do this work. And so, day one, I'm sure there's a lot of things you have to figure out. Like, what was it like to get started?
So maybe I'll begin because I was part of what we call the Lucky 8. We had a slightly different selection process in California. So it was a 2-part process where our first eight of us were selected, and then the 8 of us had to select the final 6. So 8 of us arrived in Sacramento, and it was more than a little awkward because we immediately had to go into a public meeting. And on the other thing that was strange is, of course, we had all kind of done our homework and read up on the other 7 people who were going to be there. And we had to just literally launch and start a meeting. But our Secretary of State had assembled us the night before, thankfully. And so we at least had dinner together beforehand. Most of us had made it to that dinner. But it was still a little awkward, honestly. We just kind of rolled with the punches and had our meeting. And our first task was actually to select the other 6. So we had to you know, publicly discuss the other candidates, which was also a little awkward. But you know, it's like with any new group of people, I think you start to get to know them, and it was just, you had to get to know them in a public setting. And so I don't know, what was it like for you, Andre, as one of the select six?
Yeah, that was the same here. It was really a little awkward at first, but I think what kept us going was the fact that we were all very serious about what we were doing. Once we got over the surprise that we were the ones that were going to do this awesome job, which took a while to settle in, we got to know each other pretty quickly, and we knew that we all had basic skills or abilities, or otherwise we wouldn't have been selected. So we knew that we were among a very highly recommended group of people. So we knew that we had some skills to bring to the table. But what really mattered the most was some of our communication that happened outside of the actual realm, as Cynthia was saying, outside of the realm of us working together on commission work. It was just breaking down the barriers, getting to know each other, becoming familiar with one another at the lunches. And we were restricted as to what we could say because of what we have here in California. It's a Bagley-Keene rules. So we couldn't just talk about commission related work when we socialized, and that was very helpful. We created bonds and did what we normally did, but what was important was that we knew that we had an awesome responsibility with the 9 months of creating 177 maps, and we took that seriously. And that was our bonding experience. We didn't want this to fail. It was the first time ever we had anything like this had occurred, and we were all very serious about it being successful. And we depended on each other's strengths and figured out how to work with one another very quickly, because we didn't have any time to waste or to spare, no time for any bickering or any of that kind of stuff. We just dove in and did our best to get the job done. Yeah.
Right. Well, so that I think leads nicely into my next question, because, you know, Vasily mentioned in his presentation that there's, you know, times when it's like you're working on it full time, and there are times when, you know, it's part-time or it's a little slower. But kind of on average, you know, if we said like, okay, an average day of commission work, what was that like? What kinds of things were you doing?
Oh, I don't know if there was an average day. There were probably average days within different phases. So, so the initial phase was kind of figuring out how to govern ourselves and coming up with our rules. So, you know, we decided to divide and conquer and come up with some advisory committees based on, you know, who had what kinds of backgrounds and strengths or interests. You know, we actually created 5, you know, subcommittees essentially that were kind of focus on different aspects like outreach, like, you know, public information, the business side of running the commission, et cetera. So, you know, we had to decide on our leadership. And so these were the kinds of initial setup tasks that, you know, kind of consumed us for several months until we got the census data. And then once we got the census data, then we went into another phase. You want to talk about that, Andre?
Yeah, after we got the data, then we were really off and running. It took us a while to get it, but once we did, we had to basically take that data and approach. Well, one of the things that we needed to do first was to outreach to the very broad citizenship of California, from north to south, and include everyone. But with the data itself, what was important about that was that we were able to strategize how we were going to approach this awesome task, and geographically approach how we were going to proceed. We had Section 2 and Section 5 requirements initially, so we decided to look at those counties first, and then
the Voting Rights Act.
The Voting Rights Act, yes, the Voting Rights Act, to make sure that we abided by all the rules that were in place that we were confined with. Well, not confined with, but were subject to. And yeah, but I think what was important there was that once we received those data, and I think it was what, April, maybe it was about April.
Yep.
Yes,
California was last. We have the biggest state.
yeah, right. Yes, 40 million people. So we had from April until August to do all of what we had to do, outreach to the public, and actually come up with a set of draft maps, and then go back around again for another round of public input meetings and outreach, and then come up with what we thought what was near final version. So that was the most intense part of the process. Once we received the data and began outreaching to the public, and then coming up with our what we call visualizations of what we thought our first round was. That's when it was most intense, and when the time commitment really increased drastically during that time. I worked for the city, so I had a full-time job with the city, and I did this work, and it was equally about 40 hours a week as well. With the traveling, when we did the traveling, and also the reading of the materials, we had enormous volumes of public comments to read over prior to actually traveling to a particular venue or site or city. We had to become familiar with what the issues were in that particular locale. But it was it's doable for a person. I don't want to make it sound like it's really just an awesome or a burdensome task. It's doable if you exercise time management and organization, and you really have to. So when you say something,
kind of squeeze, you know, our travel in kind of chunks so that people could plan. And we would go to a venue. We would have a business meeting usually to deal with. It could be anything from developing our travel policy to figuring out, you know, deep logistics for the next meeting. So we would have kind of a business meeting during the day, and then generally in the evening we would have a public input hearing, because evenings and weekends, to make it convenient for, you know, any members of the public to come and testify. And that meeting could take anywhere from 3 hours to 5 to 6 hours sometimes, depending on the venue and if they allowed us to stay late. And then go home, you know, go to your hotel, and then in the morning we'd be off to another location. So that was, as Andre said, a very intense part.
Right. And I mean, obviously now with everything happening with COVID-19, you know, that process will look a little different, just like.
Yeah, it might all be virtual.
Oh, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So just like other public bodies have all switched to Zoom meetings and things like that, you know, our Michigan Commission will have to take those things into consideration, and they get to decide how you'll host those meetings and things. Right?
Absolutely. One of the decisions our commission made, for better or for worse, is we decided that all 14 commissioners needed to attend all of these public input hearings, partly because we wanted the public to see the full commission in our full range of diversity. We have the same requirements for diversity to reflect California. And partly because we know that people, you know, may be less engaged calling in. You know, it may not be a choice in this post-pandemic world, but, you know, we had a choice. So we wanted everyone to be present and hear the same input from the public. So that was a decision we made. I could very easily see future commissions, regardless of a pandemic situation, making a decision to allow, either split us up. We had a whole discussion about whether, you know, 4 of us should go here and 5 of us should go there, and in the end we decided all 14 of us should. But that was a decision we made.
Right.
Right. That's what I hope everyone's catching from what you're saying, is the amount of discussion and decision making that was made as a group. You know, that's one of those things that would be the same on the Michigan Commission.
Yeah, and everybody had different circumstances. We had, you know, a couple of young mothers who had children and childcare considerations. You know, Andre had a full-time job. 6 of us were small business owners. So all of us had, we had a couple of university professors, so we had, all kinds of different life circumstances, and we had to see what worked well for everyone.
Right. Great. So I want to remind everyone that if you want to ask a question directly to Cynthia and Andre, just click the raise your hand button or dial *9. If you type your question in the chat to one of them, I can read it aloud. I know that we do have one question from Ingrid. So Melinda, our actual moderator, is gonna take Ingrid off mute, and there she is.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. So my question is, what sort of professional resources and help were you able to get during, as Boz has indicated, it's not necessary for everyone to be experts or for anyone to be an expert. What sort of resources and assistance does your commission have to fulfill your obligation?
So first of all, we had a whole staff. You guys will have this, I believe your Secretary of State's office will be supporting you. We had to we're a separate agency in California. We actually had to set up a new state agency and hire a whole staff. So I think what did we get up to, Andre? Like 18 people? We
did, yeah, for us.
Yeah, we had 18 people fully staffed. And we had our own communications director, we had our own general counsel, all kinds of people doing our accounting and logistics, setting up our events, all that other stuff.
And then we had to interview these people.
Go ahead, Andre.
No, and I'm sorry for interrupting. I just wanted to let you know we had to send out the RFPs and interview these people. And the state had a very rigid process. We could not depend on that timeline because we had to move in real fast motion. So we had to accelerate that and go beyond and knock on doors and try to do things a little bit differently because it was the first time ever anyone had done that. So we had to put all these things in place very quickly and sometimes circumventing the regular rules and guidelines at the state.
Yeah, we were a government startup, which is a bit of an oxymoron. Best description. But yeah, most importantly, we, as Andre said, we use an RFP process to hire line drawing consultants to operate the software and take the census data. And we would say, draw a district that looks like this, and they would do all the technical stuff. And make sure it had the right number of people in it, et cetera. So the line drawing firm was one important hire, and the other hire was VRA consultants, people who are steeped. Although all of us feel like we're experts now, but we hired professionals who knew what they were doing, knew the law.
It's funny because the way you describe this, so much of it reminds me of the school board, which I started on the school board a few years ago. And it reminds me so much of like how quickly you become an expert in certain areas and you're really trying to design the work and work together. It just very much reminds me of that.
Like Andre, neither of us are attorneys, but as we say, we play one on the internet.
Yes. We know the language very well now. What was helpful also on a day-to-day work level too was just reading the daily newspapers. Just there was abundance of feedback we got from public comments and just basically GPS. I found useful just travel logs, learning about, or AAA guidebooks, just learning about a certain region, that I was fortunate because I traveled throughout the entire state before, all 58 counties, but just to familiarize yourself with the the specific characteristics of a locale was very helpful too in the process of line drawing. Yeah.
That's great. I'm gonna actually unmute Bilal from the Secretary of State's office. Since we're talking about resources, I just want to give you an opportunity, Bilal, to kind of add any coloring to resources and things that are unique for Michigan.
Yeah, that's a great question to ask because, well, hello everyone, my name is Bilal. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm so glad that we have two people from the Redistricting Commission of California here to talk a little bit about what's going on with Michigan. You have a lot of autonomy, right? You get a budget of about $4 to $4.5 million to work with. You'll get your compensation of about $40,000 as well. But with that budget, you're able to take your own autonomy with it. Like, it is, how to describe it, you are a legislator at this point. You are able to act with autonomy in that you are able to hire staff and set your own rules of procedure. You're able to be FOIA'd. You have all these benefits and advantages that come with being this legislator. And so taking that position to hire people to train you on cartography, if that's what you want, to host events that are a little bit more colorful, you're really able to take advantage of your budget. And since this is the first time in Michigan history, second time in US history, second only to the wonderful California Commission, you really are able to kind of set that framework. And I honestly wish I could apply for this commission just because of how amazing of an opportunity I think it's going to be.
Thanks, I appreciate
Thank
that.
you.
So recapping, you get a budget. With that budget, you get to, you know, spend money on what you need to get the job done and to do this well, right? Yeah. So I don't have other questions yet, but I mean, I have questions, so I'm my questions. And then if more come in from our audience members, we'll definitely make sure to capture those. I think you both spoke a lot about the travel. So we're wondering, like, you know, what was it like to organize that travel and make sure that you were engaging these diverse communities? What was that like for you?
Part of our staff, we call them our advanced team. They looked at the various cities we were scheduled to go to. We, in our committees and subcommittees, determined what cities we'd go to. We tried to make sure that we covered the entire state regionally, and in terms of urban, rural areas, agricultural areas, coastal areas, Central Valley. California is so diverse, as we all know. So we wanted to make sure that we reached every segment of the population as best as we could with the time that we had. But our advanced team went out and they found locales. We tried to find places that were free, first of all, and basically that could accommodate our audiences, that were secure, of course, had parking and so on. So to make a long story short, our advanced team did a lot of the work, and we basically agreed upon what the options they presented to us as our locations.
Yeah, I will say that both Andre and I were out in Michigan just several months ago, actually. And, you know, one of the things we've done is met with Michigan Council and Foundations to try to encourage the philanthropic sector to help galvanize community organizations to make sure that you get diverse testimony. You can't just have a diverse commission and, you know, not have any testimony from diverse communities. And we were fortunate in California to be supported by a foundation that focuses only on California called the Irvine Foundation. They actually funded a bunch of grassroots organizations to make sure they got their community members to come and testify in front of the commission to make sure we were hearing good, you know, rich, diverse selection of voices from, you know, citizens telling us how they wanted their districts to look and what are the reasons, according to our criteria, why the district should be drawn a certain way or not.
Mm-hmm. Right. So one of the, okay, I've got questions coming into the chat, so this is great. One of them is, so the question is written, how many hours a week is required? But I think it might be easier for you to describe, like, what were the busiest periods and then what were kind of the slower periods, because it fluctuates everyone, you know, how much time you spend doing it.
Yeah, I would describe it as a slow roll that went to a pretty major crescendo in the last couple of months.
Right.
It was kind of part-time in the beginning, you know, and then we were doing some initial community input before we got the census data, just to kind of get general feedback in certain regions. And the minute we got the census data, you know, we you know, could start actually drawing real districts, and it got more intense
Mm-hmm.
all the way until the final month, right? Final month, we were practically living in Sacramento. We were sometimes drawing maps at 18 hours a day. But that was partly because we were so, we were the first commission, and they didn't give us a lot of time to actually do our job. We only had like 7.5 months to do the entire process, 177 districts. And so we all decided it was completely ridiculous, and we would never want to subject another commission to the same time schedule we had. So we actually got, we are allowed by our Constitution to propose legislation to improve the process. And so the legislators approved our proposal to give the next commission a full year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow, which is how much time we have in Michigan. It's
right, because you saw what we went through too, and you would not want to subject your commission to that.
Right. So another question that came through: what were some of your most debated issues, among your peers?
You take that, Andre.
Oh, gee. Gee. We would spend hours, literally, in some of our business meetings. We'd spend hours over just one subject. We'd have one subject you would think would be a simple subject to discuss and resolve, or an issue to resolve, but we spend 3 or 4 hours, take a break, come back, and still deal with it. One thing about us is that we had a supermajority. When we made every vote that we brought to the table, we had a majority. The majority of us had to decide in favor of it. So out of the 14 of us, we had 8, about 8 of us that needed to agree upon the
9.
subject. So
3 out of,
yeah. We had to have 3 Republicans, 3 Democrats, and 3 declined the state. So 9, yeah. So there were so many subjects that we had to debate. I don't know which ones stand out to be the most important, or which ones I think I can foresee Michigan having to also deal with.
Well, for example, I think the decision on choosing the attorneys, the 2 big kind of vendor decisions.
The big
for the Voting Rights Act.
Voting Rights Act, yeah. The line drawers was another one. How do we pick them? Because we went with a group from Berkeley, based in Berkeley, that had access to a statewide database, but there were other competent, qualified candidates out there, but we had to research and make sure they didn't have any political or partisan affiliations. So we had to thoroughly vet them. Line drawing.
Another one that comes to mind, we had constitutional criteria by which we had to make decisions. So one of the questions was about population deviation.
That's right.
We have to have about the same number of people in every district, and congressional has to be plus or minus 1 person, but for legislative districts, we have more latitude. And so we had to make a decision as a group, it's going to be plus or minus what for these legislative districts. And as you can imagine, if the bigger the deviation, kind of the more flexibility you have and how you draw districts. We ended up with a really tight deviation. We did plus or minus 1%. And most of the districts were plus or minus 0.5%. And the rationale for that was that California is so big, like our state Senate districts are almost 1 million people, that 1% is actually a lot. It's a big deviation. So we went with really tight deviation.
Wow. I mean, and even just, for some folks kind of thinking about deviation and percentages, I think could be a little overwhelming. So, having the support of staff and things like that to, break it down for you and help keep you up to speed, I imagine is really helpful.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So another question that came through, which I think based on what you said is really directed at Andre, was how is it working full-time and balancing the obligations of the commission?
Yeah, my situation was a little bit more unusual. than most because, again, I had a full-time job and I worked in the planning department for the city of LA, and we had public notices for those activities too, zone changes and conditional use permits and so on, with 2 weeks notices. And we had 2 weeks notices for commission activity. So I'm one of the few commissioners that did not. We had a revolving chair we decided collectively to have a revolving chairperson and vice chair. I didn't volunteer to be a chair for any of the commission meetings because I was just overwhelmed with meeting deadlines for 2 publicly noticed activities. Didn't want to mix up the two because it was totally an interesting challenge trying to balance a balancing act. But for me, a typical day during the busiest part of it was I worked a 4:40 schedule, so that's 10 hours a day from 9 until 6, for example, for the city. Leave there at 6 o'clock or later, usually working later, 8, 9, get off of work downtown and go home and be ready for the next day of work, Monday through Thursday. Leave Thursday, perhaps try to get off of work from instead of 8 o'clock, leave work 6 o'clock, go home, pack, because in the morning I'd be at the airport, taking the flight from LA to wherever, sometimes Sacramento, 4 or 5, wake up at 4, be on the plane at 6, and be in Sacramento at 8, and be ready for the meeting at 9 or 10 o'clock. And read a lot on the plane, read a lot on the trains, read a lot on the buses, every spare moment you have. Be at the meetings from Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday night, leave, we'll just say Sacramento, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, go home, be brief, take a nap, be up, ready 6 o'clock that Monday morning, and be back at City Hall at 9 o'clock that morning, and do that for 2 or 3 weeks in a row. We didn't have vacation time for the city.
But we did get to do this in LA a number of times. So we were all over the city.
Right. We did. I did get a few breaks in Culver City and LA, so that was helpful. But the city didn't have vacation time or sick leave time, so it was not like jury duty. So the city didn't have any allowances for that. So I actually had to use my vacation time and use my sick leave time when I wasn't sick. So I really couldn't afford to take a vacation or get sick. But those are little nuances that people have to work out. In Michigan, folks will have to work out the work for government. But it was a labor of love. But during the most intense period, again, it came down to time management skills and organizational skills. And by having these teleconferences too, that was very helpful as well. When we possibly could implement that. The line drawing stage back in August or the latter part of July was where we basically were almost sequestered. Cynthia, we were intensely for 20, it felt like 16-hour days just working on these line drawing scenarios or scenes or visualizations we came up with. And
hopefully that was just a unique situation for the first California Commission.
Right.
So we had the California Democratic Party actually opposed the commission in California and actually put a referendum on the ballot to try to shut us down before we started. And so things were changing up until the last minute, and we only had, like I said, about seven and a half months to do the job.
Yeah. But those were those spurts. We had spurts. But for the most part, I just want to leave my comments by saying it's manageable. And our situation was extremely unique because we had these challenges that no other state or no other commission had before. So we had to sort of figure out how to best make it fit so that we could meet that deadline that we were obligated to meet. So yeah, you won't have the same intense periods, I'm sure.
Well, 12 months versus 7 already has to make a difference. Bilal, I'm wondering if maybe you can share a bit about Michigan and employer requirements if someone is selected for the commission?
There's not much difference between California, actually. Like Andre said, it's like you're on jury duty. Your job is constitutionally protected, as in if you choose to leave your job to do this role, your position must be held by the state. And if you choose to do both at the same time, the employer is required to at least attempt to work with you on finding some sort of compromise of time.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
I had a couple other questions here that I think are better suited for you as well in the chat. Sure. One had to do with submitting progress reports and expectations for the stages of completion. You know, are those things determined by the state, or is that still within the commission, how they set their mile markers for progress?
Mm-hmm. For the most part, that is going to be determined by the commission itself. When they have their first few meetings, it will be most likely, how are we going to be running this? What are rules of procedure? What staff are we looking at hiring, getting to know each other? It's, I think this is answering another question as well, is just the first couple sessions, especially with the census potentially being delayed, is going to look like getting to know each other, getting to know what the commission is going to look like, setting those rules, and then looking at census data from previous years to kind of see what it would be like in a simulated situation. So you can work with that and then have something substantial behind you when you go to actually apply the new census data.
Right. And then the other question I saw that for you was just about kind of recapping the selection. I think the question was what attributes are required to be considered. But since it's not really like applying for a job, it's more of kind of, you know, if you could recap that selection process.
Yeah, it's a little different than California. Ours is completely random selection. So if you apply, you have an equal chance as almost everyone else to be selected. The difference between us and California is that we had an optional section for an essay portion where you can kind of describe why you believe in this cause, why you want to be a part of this commission, and why you identify with your political party that you listed. Besides that, the 200 pool is statistically weighted based on geographic and demographic data. And then the 13 commissioners are randomly selected from that 200 pool.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
So another question that I have, Cynthia, to you, Cynthia and Andre, is do you have recommendations for this commission on how they identify support for their work? And I'm gonna just give you some context for the question. So this person, John Chamberlain, was pointing out how critical the Irvine Foundation was in your work. And they're specifically concerned about Michigan commissioners knowing if they're getting enough broad participation from communities of interest. So just wondering if you have recommendations on, you know, identifying those resources or, you know, lessons that you learned on making sure that you had the right folks supporting your work.
We were very fortunate to have advocacy groups and partners. We had the League of Conservation Voters. We had various groups that were advocating for different ethnic minority involvement. We had about maybe 20 or 30 that I can think of right off the top of my head that were basically there every step of the way. They were attending our meetings, they were writing articles, they were really keeping us abreast of what the trends were in terms of redistricting and what the public sentiment was. And basically, a lot of the advanced work in terms of outreach was done by these various groups that worked very closely with us. And they were there at our meetings providing comment each and every day. I don't want to start mentioning them because there were far too many to mention, but we certainly had a third wing, you know, that worked with us every step of the way to make sure that we were fully engaged with their wanting to see this project succeed. And
that was, as John pointed out, largely because of the Irvine Foundation. Again, because we were really short on time for this first process in California, we actually punted on doing outreach ourselves. That was actually part of our charter, but we literally had no time to do it. And so we had to rely very heavily on the Irvine funded organizations to kind of step up and lean into that. But what we did do is we actually set aside special days for community organizations to present either regional or statewide maps. And instead of the normal 2-minute at the mic that we gave any random member of the public, these community organizations were given 20 minutes, because sometimes they actually presented a plan for the entire state, like 170.
yeah.
So obviously that's not something we'd expect them to present in 2 minutes, because we knew that these organizations, you know, represented many people who may not have shown up at the mic. So that was something that we would recommend to the Michigan Commission, to set aside time for, you know, well-known and recognized community advocacy organizations, to make sure that particularly vulnerable communities that are unlikely to get their community members to the mic, to make sure that their interests are heard.
That's right.
Great. I think we have time for, you know, 1 or 2 more questions. I know one of the questions that that I had and that we discussed in our team, we were wondering, how much were you kind of lobbied by organizations, you know, by legislators or community leaders? You know, even though there are these guidelines on the partisanship and who's holding what seats, everyone has interests in this. So I'm just curious, like, how much were you lobbied? What was that experience like?
I would say a fair amount. There were people who were clearly shills for partisan interests. And the good thing is, since there's a, you know, just like in Michigan, we have a requirement for transparency and open meetings. So people who did not honestly identify who they were affiliated with were usually outed by somebody else in the audience, or we'd get a public comment on the website, you know, so-and-so who said he was, you know, mayor of whatever city is also head of the, you know, Republican or Democratic Central Committee for the county. So people would often introduce themselves in a nonpartisan role and neglect to mention their partisan interests. And so I would say that we probably caught 99% of those folks because of the transparency.
That's right.
Andre?
Transparent. That's right. The transparency element really kept us on our toes when we were looking at. There were certain signs, like we knew obviously if someone we went to a particular location. I can think of one example where this one person who gave public comment was advocating us to include a certain community. That's because he lived in that community and he was running for office. He was planning on running for office in that community. So we had to sort of sort through the intentions and motivations of some of the public testimony that we received, and we got pretty good at it as we got
I mean,
on.
I don't think it was an overwhelming number, but it definitely happened, and definitely people who were also in the audience or other people who were watching the commission on the internet would send us notes and send us links and say, who's this person really is, or this is the organization they really represent, or this. Right. We had some fake organizations come and present to us, and it was kind of obvious because they didn't have a website and there was no history and they weren't registered anywhere. So, I mean, we definitely had to sort through that. I think it's actually going to be worse this cycle. So, you know, I think there'll be potentially foreign actors who, you know, they're going to be bots that, you know, flood the social media and all that. They're not even going to be real people. These are some of the things we're warning the next California Commission on. We saw some of that. They're going to see 10 times more. So there are lots of technology tools that can be used to kind of find that stuff. So I strongly recommend that the next commissions hire someone to to engage those kinds of tools to prevent that kind of fake testimony.
Yes.
Great. Well, I definitely am Bilal, I'm gonna give you a moment to just add anything that you think needs to be added. But first, I just want to say, see if Andre and Cynthia, do you guys have any kind of final thoughts? You know, everyone who leaves this, like, here's like what you gotta remember when you leave, the thing you need to know. Do you have any final thoughts in that way?
Yeah. First of all, if you haven't done the census, do it now. Turn that in. If you haven't applied, apply. You're all qualified, and this will be possibly the most important thing you do in your life. And that's the way I feel about
That's right.
my experience. So, so don't hesitate. Apply. Get it in before the deadline, and make a difference.
Yeah. I'll ditto. That's right. This is, don't be intimidated by the process. This is everyone's, it's open for everyone to at least throw in your application. You've got until June 1st, so go for it and give it your best shot.
Thank you both so much for joining us. I found this to be really helpful. I hope that others have found it to be helpful. If you have, and you want to, click the green check mark or write it in the chat, we obviously love to see that affirmation. We want to know that this was meaningful to you. And then Bilal, is there anything that you want to add just from the Secretary of State's office, or, kind of Michigan stuff that we need to make sure we absolutely have as we leave? I've got you.
Yeah. I mean, everyone here has done a great job describing what this will look like, what the process is like, and its significance. And so all I can say really is apply. It is an amazing opportunity. It is something you'll be compensated for. You'll go down in Michigan's history. I mean, look at Andre and Cynthia. They, to this day, are still going around the country and talking about their experience. You will be a celebrity. And throughout the whole process, you guys are. You guys have done some
redistricting rock stars.
Rock stars. Yeah.
And like they said, Michigan is home to many nonprofits and organizations that are going to be dedicated to making sure you have as easy of a time during this process. And so they really are all here working together for this. The last thing I will say is we, as of last week, officially surpassed the number of applicants California had in 2010. So, like, drop.
All right. Okay. All right.
If you're interested in applying, and we really hope you are, you want to go to let me make sure I say it right. Redistrictingmichigan.org. You can find all the information you need there, the application, the free notaries, everything you need is right there. You can also find information about the current applicant pool, the number of applicants, ethnicity, geography. You can find that on that website as well. And remember, it is completely random. It is your name being pulled out of a hat of thousands. But the way probability works is, like, the more folks that are in there, especially from Detroit, the more likely it is that you're able to get selected, or at least Detroit representation is able to be selected. So really hope this was meaningful to you. In our follow-up email to everyone, we'll make sure we include any additional resources and a reminder about that redistrictingmichigan.org. And beyond that, thank you so much for your time, and we hope you have a wonderful evening.